Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to a special Sunday edition of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We are here getting you ready for Week 10. Just as the games are kicking off, we have a return of international play. So, Dennis, since that game is kicking off right about now, why don't we start with that one? The Atlanta Falcons 3-5 at the 7-2 Indianapolis Colts in Germany. It's been a tough go for the Falcons. 3 straight losses. They have failed to get that running game going. Do you think that changes for Bijan Robinson against the Colts?
Well, Guten Morgen, Matt. Guten Morgen. The Colts are pretty tough against the run, but they give up the 9th most receptions to running backs. So I think, unfortunately, we've seen Atlanta go away from giving the ball to their best player. Hopefully they're smart enough. I think you still need to give Bijan 15 carries, but then also get him involved in the passing game, because that's where the Colts can be susceptible. The real challenge will be with the Falcons defense, with Pittman and Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor. The Colts have the ability to be very, very balanced, and they've got a mobile quarterback. You know, that game we all kind of, had in the back of our mind for Daniel Jones happened last week. Is it going to start a trend of him being, turnover-ish, or is it going to be one of those, sometimes that shit happens? I tend to lean a little bit more towards that. So I think the Colts will be able to make plays on offense. So that means that when the Falcons have the ball, Penix is going to have to be able to hit his guys. Can he get the ball effectively to Drake London? Will Darnell Mooney finally give us some kind of consistency? Kyle Pitts has been doing pretty well in the pass volume area, but he hasn't been producing a lot of touchdowns and yards. So there's some opportunity there, but I think this game is going to go the way Bijan goes. And if the Atlanta OC, I forget who their new OC is, goes away from getting the ball to Bijan, I think that's shooting themselves in the foot.
Their OC is Zach Robinson, who was with the Rams. I will have to say the injury report almost gave me a heart attack. Apparently, there are 2 players with the last name London on the Atlanta Falcons roster, and one of the Londons, not Drake, is inactive. It just said London shoulder inactive, and I was, oh my God, my lineups have already locked. And I was like, oh, who's LaCale London? Not who I was looking for. You mentioned the passing game. Alec Pierce has had a really strong season, and you would think them moving A.D. Mitchell in trade was a recognition that they like the 3 that they have with Pierce, Downs, and Pittman. Feels like a little bit of a reversal from where we were a couple of years ago with Pierce, where it seemed like they were, when they drafted Mitchell, it seemed like they were maybe moving on from him, but he's kind of become that deep threat the last 2 years. How do you feel about him, though, for fantasy?
I think Pierce is great. He's a little bit volatile. He's the deep threat. on that team. And I think some of the trepidation we had with him a couple years ago was directly related to his ability to stay healthy. And he was a deep threat coming out of Cincinnati. He's big. He's one of these 6'3", 205, 210-pound receivers with really, really good speed. And he's shown his ability, a real good ability to catch the deep ball. He's averaging, I think, 20.7 yards per reception this year and 20.9. I guess, again, there I go, not reading my notes, which is more than 2 yards higher than the player averaging the second most yards per catch, which is one of my favorites, Kayshon Boutte, who's out today. But with Pierce and Pittman and Downs, like they have the ability to adapt their game to any type of defensive weakness. You know, Downs is that really quick twitch slot receiver with some speed. Pittman's a big alpha, 6'5", 220. And then you got Tyler Warren and Jonathan Taylor in there. So long as Jones keeps the turnovers at bay, and I don't think Atlanta spent a lot of resources last year in rebuilding their defense, bringing in some young talent, and we saw it pay off a little bit last week in the those two edge rushers. Walker got the strip sack, and Pierce got the return for the touchdown last week, and that's what they drafted those guys high for. But yeah, I love Alec Pierce. He's like the perfect wide receiver 3 for your team because he's more consistent than Jamison Williams right now, and those are two guys I would put in the same category as type of play.
I am taking the Colts in this one.
So am I.
We'll back up and look at the first game of the week, which was, charitably a game. Thursday Night Football, the Denver Broncos hosted the Raiders. They got the 10-7 victory. They moved to 8-2, technically going into today, the best record in the NFL, but there was nothing about that game that you would describe as best. More penalties than first downs for these teams. We'll start with the Raiders. Only 7 points after a huge game, and that 7 points came on the second drive of the game, so really nothing on offense for most of the game. After a huge week in return for Brock Bowers, he only saw 3 targets, 1 for 31. They couldn't really get a lot sustained on the ground, couldn't get much sustained in the air. What do you make of the Raiders' offense?
So their best lineman, Colton Miller, was out again, I believe. He's been in and out of the lineup this year. And they don't have a lot of talent along the O-line. We knew it was going to be a challenge for them because Geno, for all the good he's had in his, resurgent career, he doesn't handle pressure real well. And so being unable to, convert some of those things, getting a lot, like it seemed like in that game, like there wasn't a third down sack. Wasn't like, oh, come here, girl. It just was like, it was brutal. He just couldn't. He
looked injured for half the fourth quarter. He didn't look like he could move, and they just kept picking him out.
Yeah, it's like it was not a great game plan. I love 19 carries for Ashton Jeanty, 5 targets for Ashton Jeanty. As a rosterer of Ashton Jeanty, I think that's great. He got the touchdown, not efficient on the ground, but some of that goes back to their big weakness, which is their O-line. I don't think that Pete's going to be one and done there, but they can the special teams guy after the block punt Thursday night, and they just disarray feels like a strong word, but they did not structure the game plan to the level of their skills and ability, and it showed. When Geno got banged up, give Pickett a shot. I don't care. It ain't. I feel like we're gonna see Aiden O'Connell here shortly, and like I know I get it, it's Kenny Pickett, but it's also Geno. Like the team is a mess.
Well, it's just like you traded for Kenny Pickett, and if Geno's struggling this much and is also injured, I don't really understand, why you wouldn't give him a shot. Denver's offense is not good.
Were they there?
Jeez, I don't know. We did have some interesting chatter in the aftermath of this game. The Broncos are 8-2. They're in first place in the AFC West. They're in first place in the whole AFC right now. But there have been a lot of criticisms of Bo Nix. During Broncos games, those criticisms for me come in the 4-letter variety when trying to cajole him into throwing a pass to hit one of these open receivers. But it is only his second year. He's only made 28 starts. His numbers are not terrible, and the team has been winning. They've won 18 of those starts that he's made, which is not too bad. But is Bo Nix good?
He's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. And there's definitely some ability there. I like the mobility a lot. He can do a lot of things to maybe extend a play. Whether or not, like you said, he's not seeing the field well, I don't think the Raiders had 1-2 sacks. So it didn't feel like.
Well, and he only got sacked once. One of those sacks was on an ill-conceived pass. Cortland Sutton took a sack.
Oh, well, so one sack. I feel like somebody who started 50-plus games in college should be able to see the field better. And whether it's, maybe Peyton is trying to narrow things down for him, and that's why he's not seeing it, because he's really focused on one side. But even then, his secret weapon is his ability to run, and he had -2 yards. So use that. We've seen him. He's pretty athletic. Let's kind of make some stuff happen. He only threw the ball 28 times for 150 yards. And I think you've got to, when you've got deep threats and intermediate threats like Sutton and Franklin and, Mims was out, but you should be able to exit. I mean, he hit a 43-yarder to Pat Bryant. It isn't like, he's got nobody to throw the ball to. So where is it disconnecting? From a fantasy standpoint, I love the 18 carries for Dobbins, 77 yards. That's a fairly efficient, but Dobbins isn't getting into the end zone, and he's not getting squat in the way of passing targets. So while he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 most weeks, because he doesn't get any passing work and he's not getting into the end zone, he has the ability to eat up some clock for you, and that's kind of what they did with him this week. So I don't know. I think we have to be patient with Nix. Like you said, it is his second year, and while he did start a lot of games in college, the college isn't the same as the NFL. There's certain things, and by and large, I think Sean Payton has a fairly sophisticated offense, and I think Nix will be fine. It may be a little early to crown him the next Drew Brees, but.
So I think, as always, it's never just one problem. The play calling is rough. You talked about the not very many attempts. They could not sustain drives. They're one of the most penalized teams in the league, and they take the most dumbass inane penalties at like the most killer times. In addition to, I just don't know, what they're doing half the time. The Raiders don't have what you would call a sterling defense, and Denver went out there and had like 6 3-and-outs in a row, I think, to start this game. The reason they didn't have a lot of plays is because they couldn't get out there and make drives. I have questioned the play calling. Like you talked about the sack, and I mentioned the ill-conceived. In the red zone, they tried some kind of backwards pass. I think it was in the red zone on third down too. Some kind of backwards pass to Cortland Sutton where he was supposed to roll back into the pocket and throw the ball, and instead just rolled right into everything, crumbled, because they throw so many goddamn wide receiver screens that when you throw the ball out there and make a triangle with some of your receivers, they assume it's a wide receiver screen. So the fact that Sutton rolled backward into the pocket, and even Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, who are fairly forgiving, I think Kirk Herbstreit called it a poorly designed play. That's really being charitable. But the one thing that is consistently frustrating me as somebody who's watched every one of Knicks' snaps and throws, unfortunately, is 4 or 5 times a game, he has a receiver wide open down the field, and he misses them. And at the beginning of the season, I thought that was growing pains, but we are 10 weeks in. Like, you've got to make some of those. You talk about that 43-yarder to Pat Bryant. That was a 12-yard pass that Pat Bryant turned up the field and ran. But he has deep balls available to Franklin, to Bryant, to Sutton, and he misses them. And sometimes he misses them so badly. It's really, that's the part that I find concerning. I'm not like, can't remember what's his name that said that Denver needs to give up on him and draft a new quarterback. He's getting filleted for that. He's a big radio personality. I can't think of it'll come to me, but it is frustrating, and I think it's going to be frustrating going forward. You mentioned J.K. Dobbins. He got somewhat of a brutal midfoot ankle injury. I think there's a chance that he's out, and in Week 11 they host the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's going to be a game where we learn a little more about the Broncos. But enough about one of the worst games in the league in the year. Actually, I don't know if you saw this statistic. I had to save it because that game Thursday night was historical. The Broncos Raiders was just the second NFL game since 1950 to have more penalties than first downs. The other game with such stats was played in 1976. So congratulations. We just witnessed one of the worst games of all time.
Right.
And, I thought that London game against the Jets was going to be the nadir of the Broncos season, but they said, hold my beer. We got a Thursday night one for you. Going to the 1 p.m. Eastern starts, New York Giants 2-7 at the 5-3 Chicago Bears. No Malik Neighbors. How are you feeling about the Giants receivers?
Now, Wan'Dale Robinson is having a pretty strong year. With Neighbors out, there's the chance for my boy Darius Slayton to kind of make a comeback. The Bears are giving up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. So there's an opportunity here for Slayton and Wan'Dale to be productive. Whether it comes to fruition or not, it's a great question. Losing Cam Scatterbo at the running back position doesn't help them. Tracy and Devin Singletary are serviceable is probably where I'd put them. But if they can make some plays in the passing game and with Dart's legs, I think they can keep it competitive.
Yeah, And I like kind of what they're doing with their tight ends a little bit too. Theo Johnson has been getting involved, and your boy Daniel Bellinger, they've been getting him involved.
Pops his head up every now and again like a good old whack-a-mole.
You would think a Bears defense that just looked like it didn't exist in Cincinnati might be a good target. Dart is good for fantasy, I think, too, because he runs. But
yeah.
Meanwhile, it was a big goose egg for Rome Odunze last week, despite the fact the Bears put up 47 points. His dad basically suggested they might as well trade him if they're not going to use him, which feels ironic because for the first few weeks of the season, Rome Odunze was probably the only good thing about the Bears' pass offense. So how are we feeling about him this week?
So I didn't get the rest of the week's practice reports. I know he didn't practice on Wednesday. If he's playing, you feel good about him. He's very
not
good
listed
player.
on the injury report. So
awesome. So, the Giants aren't a good team. It's a great opportunity for him to, they do get some pressure on the quarterback, which can give Caleb Williams a little bit, as I think about that with Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns there. They can make the front a little bit dicey there. I think, we see AJ Brown having those kinds of games this year too. So like, are we gonna cut every wide receiver that we drafted in the first and second round as soon as they have a goose egg game? No, we're not. Rome's going to be fine. It isn't like that team is without weapons there in Chicago with Loveland and Monangai and Swift and DJ Moore. I'm forgetting another wide receiver, Luther Burden. So they've got some weapons, and there's going to be games where, maybe Rome isn't the primary focus. Dad needs to clam up a little bit. I get it. You want, quit being a little league parent, I guess is the advice I would give to Rome's dad. They're going to use Rome just fine. He's going to be out there. He's going to be running routes. He's going to get some targets. He's going to be good. I'm not too worried about Rome Odunze.
I am taking the Bears in this one.
So am I.
Another barn burner of a game, the 6-2 Buffalo Bills at the 2-7 Miami Dolphins. Dennis, Keon Coleman started out with a huge week one. He's been practically non-existent since. What do we make of him long-term?
I was just in the store the other day, and I saw his picture on the side of a milk carton with the "Have you seen me?" notice.
Did you take that over to Josh Allen's house?
Buffalo's about 6 hours from here. Wasn't going to make that trek on a busy week. He was wide receiver 2 in week 1, and he's been wide receiver 74 since then. Leading up to the season and early in the season, one of the things that we've always that we've been concerned about with the Bills is, 1, Josh Allen vulture and touchdowns, and 2, them not needing to throw the ball a lot, and 3, when they do throw the ball, they just spread it around. They don't have a pass funnel offense. 1 week it could be Shakir, 1 week it could be Dick Kincaid, 1 week it could be Coleman. Hell, 1 week it could be Curtis Samuel of all people. So you're gonna be frustrated rostering them. They're more frustrating than the Green Bay receivers, because at least the Green Bay receivers, it's a little bit narrower of a funnel in Green Bay and a little higher passing volume in Green Bay. So I think long-term, Coleman has the opportunity to establish himself as one of the outside receivers in Buffalo. I don't know if that offensive structure will allow him to consistently get 8 targets a game. And so that makes him a dicey play in fantasy, because you could get 2 to 3 targets 1 week, 8 to 12 targets the next week, 3 to 5, 2 to 3, 8. It's going to bounce around. It's very game plan dependent. And with their defense, you never know when they turn a couple balls over. Next thing you know, Buffalo's up by 21 early, and now James Cook's carrying the ball 27 times for 200 yards.
Yeah, it feels like to me, Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid are more the pass catchers I want to play, and Coleman's, maybe some bye week desperation.
He's a plug and pray guy.
Meanwhile, Miami, they need some targets. Greg Dulcich, a one-time third-round draft pick, was picked up by Miami and actually got in because Darren Waller is on IR. Had 5 receptions last week. Do you think he could become a thing?
I mean, Gary Barnidge was a thing back in the day. Made a nice post football career off of one good fantasy season. His rookie year, he was tight end 16, weeks 6 to 16. Miami needs weapons, and right now he's probably their most athletic tight end. Julian Hill is out. I don't even know who the rest of their tight ends are. I don't know if Durham Smythe is still there, but he's basically a glorified tackle. Yeah, can he be something? Yeah, but I'm not going to put any consistency in it. He's a guy that was worth adding in waivers if you had a roster spot that you needed to burn, to see, is something going to happen? Can he establish any consistency there? And who knows? He may come back again this week with, a 3 for 45 kind of day. Next week he might have a 3 for 25 and a touchdown. And if he can put up those kind of weeks, I think he becomes playable as a RB2 with RB1, low end RB1 upside. You have to kind of keep an eye on the snap count and the route participation, and what is Miami doing in the passing game, because they need weapons.
I am taking the Bills.
I am as well.
A quick update. It is now 13-7. The Colts take the lead. Their first touchdown, they missed the extra point. God bless the Colts. Jonathan Taylor, a rushing touchdown. Our boy Alec Pierce, who you talked about, already a receiving touchdown. On the other side, of course, Tyler Algier with the rushing touchdown. So never change, Atlanta. Never change. The Baltimore Ravens 3-5 at the 4-4 Minnesota Vikings. A sneaky, crucial game for both teams and their playoff hopes. Rashad Bateman got the contract extension this offseason. They like what he's done. He was actually pretty steady, flex-worthy option last year. They added DeAndre Hopkins. It seems to me neither of those guys has been a great play this season, but how are you feeling about them?
So Bateman's currently wide receiver 76, and Hopkins is wide receiver 84. I will say it has been refreshing to not hear DeAndre Hopkins whining in the press about his usage. He went to Baltimore to try to win a title. They got, Lamar got injured. The defense suffered a bunch of injuries. And he just keeps going out there and grinding and being a professional and being available and making plays when the ball is thrown to him. He's their wide receiver 3. Bateman, the unfortunate situation in Baltimore was Lamar getting hurt. What did he miss? 3 games, I think?
Maybe more than that. Let me look.
So you had this, shuffling of Cooper Rush and Tyler Huntley. And it was just a situation where they just weren't able to be very productive. So they've got Lamar back. Derrick Henry's healthier than he was earlier in the season. Mark Andrews playing well. Isaiah Likely's back. They've got all of their weapons. Now and they've gotten a bunch of guys back on defense. So now it just comes down to, can they stay healthy and make plays? If they do, I expect Bateman to kind of fall back into his red zone threat kind of role, catch some touchdown passes, have some decent games. Zay Flowers is going to keep doing what he does. Right now, they're both kind of touchdown dependent, low end flexes. But as the season kind of picks up and goes on, I would expect that that Bateman and Hopkins will start to bump up. probably the best you can expect Bateman maybe to be a flex-worthy option as things pick up. And Hopkins is probably not going to be playable in fantasy unless something happens to Bateman.
You were right. He missed 3 games. I was thinking it was more because they had that bye week. He missed 4 weeks. What are we doing with this Vikings backfield? We were excited about Jordan Mason early, but then for a lot of the time that Aaron Jones was out, Mason wasn't a spectacular play. And since Aaron Jones has come back, Mason's been probably even a worse play. But Jones hasn't been spectacular either.
I'm rocking with Aaron Jones as a flex-worthy player. Jordan Mason is let me see what my note says. Jordan Mason is a prayer. Jones was RB26 the last 2 weeks. He just he's the one being more productive out of the two of them. Now, Jones also probably has the bigger injury risk. He's 31 years old. And he's coming off being banged up. And over the course of his career, we've kind of seen him get knocked out a few games here and there. So as much as I like Aaron Jones, we can see that he's coming to the end of the road. And I just think with Jordan Mason, we saw his ceiling, and his ceiling is he's a good guy to have as your backup.
I am going to take the Ravens.
So am I.
A banger of a game, the 2-6 Cleveland Browns at the 1-7 New York Jets. Dennis Quinshon Judkins injured his shoulder before they went into a bye. Coming out, he's expected to play, but how are you feeling about him?
All right. So I love Quinshon Judkins. He's like Nick Chubb with just slightly not quite as good a runner as Chubb, doesn't have Chubb's speed, but he's a little better pass catcher than Chubb was. And that's just how Cleveland runs their offense. So he fits it great. There's going to be volatility, but he's the number one there. Until they get the quarterback situation figured out, you're always susceptible to a 5-point game from their running back. It just is what it is. So I like Judkins in Dynasty. I'm happy to hold him, happy to play him when he's starting. Understand the risk, though, that he could give you a clunker or two. And with the struggles the offensive line is having right now, getting old and whatnot, you are looking at those J.K. Dobbins kind of 18 carry for 70-yard kind of games where he's not super efficient either and doesn't get in the end zone. So, I don't know how much I'd be willing to spend on him in the stretch run to try to make a title run. But if I have him, I'm not looking to move him in Dynasty.
Meanwhile, for the Jets, they tried to trade Breece Hall. That didn't happen. Some question about how happy Breece Hall is to still be there. They've also talked about ramping up the carries for Isaiah Davis. So what are you making of this Jets backfield?
I don't have high hopes for any aspect of this offense this week. I look at some of these projections for Justin Fields and he's expected to start this week. Garrett Wilson is supposed to be back. But Fields holds the ball too long, and I get it. He's a great athlete and thinks he can make plays, but he holds the ball too long, and then he makes questionable throws. And it's going to be a challenging day offensively. And if I can move Breece Hall right now, ultimately the hope is maybe Breece has a good game. If he can get 80 yards and a touchdown against the Browns, I think you can go out and sell. Look at what he did against the Browns and maybe pull in a better draft pick. And that's why Kansas City didn't trade for him. They're like, we'll give you a fourth And the Jets are like, no, we want a 3, and both of them held steady. Seems like an idiot move, but I've just been negotiating all weekend about a Jared Goff trade, and it's kind of the same thing. Here, I want this, and the guy's like, no, I only need somebody for X number of weeks. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me how long you need this guy for. His worth is this, and you don't want to pay that, even though I'm rebuilding. I'm not the 112 for Jared Goff is not. I don't think it's what he's worth. I think he's worth more. So,
call me crazy. I'm going to take the Jets.
I'm taking the Browns. I just think the defense is. You see my Ohio State paraphernalia. Love the Buckeyes. Huge fan of Justin Fields, but from a real football perspective, I'm starting to sour on him. And whether that's a function of, at some point, it's not just how he's being coached and the team is built around him. He's had enough chances now with coaches that, some of it's got to be him.
Yeah. I it's a toss-up. I don't really understand why Dylan Gabriel's favored on the road. I guess it's the defense favored on the road. But just an ugly day. One of the better games of the week, the 7-2 New England Patriots at the 6-2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They talked this week about getting rookie Kyle Williams more involved in the passing game, probably a result of Kayshon Boutte missing. But what do you expect that to come to?
They spent a 3rd-round pick on him. We're 10 weeks into the season. Nobody has really established themselves outside of Stephon Diggs, who's just wide receiver 33. Oddly enough, Boutte's wide receiver 34, and it feels like his grip on a starting job is tenuous at best, and Diggs feels like he's just getting veteran deference. So, I want to see what Kyle Williams has. There's some questions coming out about how good his hands were. Would he have consistent enough hands at the NFL level? He's got some pretty good speed. He's got okay size. I think he's a 5'11", 200-pounder. And, I chirp a lot about the current NFL prototype, that 6 foot, 200, 205-pounder. And so he kind of falls right into that same archetype. But you're at the point now, Pop Douglas is what Pop Douglas is. He's a little slot guy. Stephon Diggs is what he is. He's an outside receiver diva. Going to have some great games. Going to have some games where, it doesn't work out right. Kayshon Boutte, for whatever reason, has not been able to earn a consistent target share. He makes plays, but he hasn't been able to earn that 8-9 targets per game week after week after week. Some of it's a function of, I think, Drake May spreading the ball around as much as they do. Drake May being able to run, so there may be times when other quarterbacks might try to make a throw that May is going to take the 8 yards on the ground. So if I'm the Patriots and Kayshon Boutte's out, this seems like a great opportunity to give Kyle Williams a little more run and see what kind of game he can put up.
Yeah, at some point
they got him.
Yeah, no. At some point they got to get some guys involved because even though Diggs has performed well, still only playing about 50% of the snaps, probably from age and injury. Meanwhile, no Bucky Irving again. The Patriots have not allowed a runner to reach 50 or more yards. So what are we expecting from the Buccaneers run game?
Well, Rachaad White's really, really good in the passing game, but doesn't have very good vision. Wouldn't be surprised if between White and Sean Tucker, neither one of them breached that 50-yard mark. The Buccaneers have struggled with injuries at wide receiver. Godwin's out again. Evans gone for the year. Jalen McMillan hasn't made it back. Emeka Egbuka's been kind of back and forth with the hamstring. Seems to be good. Tez Johnson is playing well. So, and then Cade Otton, whenever, he goes from being a complete afterthought to, oh my God, we're desperate, throw the ball to Cade Otton, and he puts up numbers. So they're going to go as far as Baker can take them. I don't think the running game is going to be their path to victory here, in part just because Rachaad White isn't that good in the running part of the running game. He's got to have that Tyrone Tracy kind of hole that Tracy had on that touchdown a couple weeks ago. Rachaad White needs holes like that. If he's got to, he's not one of those backs where you say, give him an inch and he can take it a mile. That's not Rachaad White's game.
Give him a mile and he can take it an inch.
Yeah.
I am taking the Buccaneers in this one.
I think I'm gonna. I hadn't picked this one yet. It was a toss-up for me. I'm going back and forth. I think I'm going to go with the Patriots.
Next up, the 1-8 New Orleans Saints at the suddenly hot 5-4 Carolina Panthers. Dennis, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but Alvin Kamara not looking great. Hasn't hit 30 yards rushing in a game in about a month. Hasn't hit 50 or more yards since September. Last week, 6 carries for 14 yards, had a fumble and only 1 reception. Are you worried about him in your lineups?
I think you have to be worried about any New Orleans Saint in your lineup. The quarterback play the quarterback play is an albatross around the neck of every offensive player on that team. And until Tyler Shough has a breakout, or they go back to Rattler and he has a breakout, decides, well, if they're going to bench me anyways, I'm going to stop playing safe. That the unfortunate thing is the front office is probably playing for draft position. And you're probably looking at what is it? Is it Fernando Mendoza? Whatever Mendoza brother it is, starts at Indiana as the 101 next year and being the starter in New Orleans. Alvin Kamara is like
Fernando Mendoza.
This is the only team I've ever played for. I don't want to be traded. Love New Orleans. It's great. That is. It's fantastic. But, now it's until the offensive line can give the quarterbacks enough time to throw and the quarterbacks can start to, make those connections. They got a couple good weapons in Olave and Juwan Johnson. Foster Moreau plays more of that traditional tight end role. Devon Vele, at least they got rid of Rashid Shaheed so they can get some return on that draft capital they spent on Devon Vele. It's a situation where the team is just not very good and it's weighed down by timid quarterback play. And I don't know that it gets better.
For Carolina, they're 5-4. They're actually in the playoff hunt. But what do we make of Bryce Young? Only quarterback 28 on the season, averaging 12.7 points per game, 0.2 points per game less than Spencer Rattler. How are you feeling about him?
He's kind of up and down. You got some weapons with Ted McMillan and Tavian Sanders and Jalen Coker. Rico Dowdle, it was good to see a coach say, in my best efforts to be loyal to you, Chuba Hubbard, we have to acknowledge Rico Dowdle is playing much better, and we're going to give him the ball. Let's see how far that takes us. They have their defense still needs a lot of work, and it should be a situation where they can take some shots with Bryce Young because they've got that big catch radius guy in Ted McMillan. And so they should take some shots and try to make some big plays. They're going to run the bubble screens to Xavier Legette and whatnot. But I don't know that, what Bryce Young was QB 19 prior to his injury. And now that he's back, hasn't really stepped up. I think that QB 18-19 is probably his ceiling. So he's startable right now in super flex leagues, not streamable in 1 QB leagues. But he's also a guy, when I look at sort of what is brewing in Carolina, and if I can sell myself on some optimism and room for growth for that team under Dave Canales with those weapons, he might be a guy you target in a dynasty league to bring in as your QB 2 or 3 to grow, and with the hope that it pays off in 2026.
I'm going to take the Panthers.
Somebody's got to win it, so I'm going to take the Panthers too.
5-3 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 3-5 Houston Texans. No Brian Thomas Jr., no Brenton Strange, no Travis Hunter. They did acquire Jacoby Myers. What are you expecting from the Jaguars pass catchers?
Well, Cohen said Washington's going to stick in the slot. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is out this week.
Yep.
So it's a who is it they acquired? I'm drawing
Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers. I'm like, and I know you just said it. So they're going to probably continue to, Myers I don't think he's going to get the Rashid Shaheed treatment that he's going to get in Seattle, but Myers will probably be plus 50% in the snaps. Is Diami Brown, is he healthy or is he out?
He's supposed to be in. He's not on the injury report.
So they're going to run with Brown and Washington as their top 2 wide receivers. And they're going to try to keep working the running game with Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin. It probably is good for Trevor Lawrence that Brian Thomas is out, because apparently he hates Brian Thomas. If Mac Jones made Brian Thomas a top 10 wide receiver, and Lawrence is just like, I don't like you, man. You got cooties. So I think Parker Washington is probably going to lead the team in targets this week. And if you're going to only play one wide receiver from Jacksonville, Parker Washington's that guy.
Meanwhile, Dalton Schultz, a pretty big game last week, especially seemed to have a connection with Davis Mills, who is going to be starting this week. Do you think it could be another big game for him, especially against the defense that got destroyed by the opposing tight end last week?
Well, not only did they get destroyed by the opposing tight end, but Jacksonville also gives up the fewest sacks in the NFL. So that means Davis Mills is going to have some time. The running game is inconsistent in Houston. They've got Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Daniels, or not Daniels, Jalen Noel.
Well, yeah.
They have to go along with Dalton Schultz. Jacksonville gives up their top 5 in receptions, yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points to tight ends. This is like the Arizona Cardinals of, what was it, 3 years ago, where like when you're doing your tight end rankings each week, it doesn't matter who's playing Arizona, they're your tight end 1. It's kind of getting to be like that with Jacksonville and whoever's playing them at tight end. So yeah, I think I'd look for a big game from Schultz. And Houston likes Mills. He's been around with them now. He's on his second contract with them, and he's a serviceable backup, not a guy you want to play for a whole year. I think when we looked at it a couple weeks ago, he was like in the season and a half or so that he started, I think he was like our QB 33 or something in points per game. So he wasn't awful. He just wasn't going to produce fantasy relevant games on a consistent basis. So he's got I think the weapons he has now are better. The offensive line is still a struggle bus for Houston. So who knows? Maybe that Houston offensive line is the get right game for that Jacksonville pass rush. And we're totally wrong here. But no, I think Schultz is going to have a good game, and Mills will be decent. I'm going to take the Texans.
I am also taking the Texans. The 3-5 Arizona Cardinals at the 6-2 Seattle Seahawks. Dennis Marvin Harrison Jr. has seemingly thrived with Jacoby Brissett. Do you think that continues in Week 10?
Well, I think Marvin Harrison Sr. feels like he can keep his gold jacket now that Brissett's in at quarterback. Brissett, different type of quarterback than Kyler Murray. And for what we've seen Jacoby Brissett's ceiling, and it isn't particularly high, but he understands the mission: get the ball to Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. And so that's what he's going to do. I'm excited for the prospects of it, though. Seattle's got a good team, and it could pose some issues. They've got a good defense.
Meanwhile, for Seattle, they made a trade for Rashid Shaheed this week, but a lot of mouths to feed. Are you expecting a big Week 1 game from him?
Well, there are a ton of pass catchers in Seattle, but it seems like half of them are out this week, injured. So Rashid Shaheed played under Kubiak's offense last year. He's familiar with it. He should be able to hit the ground running, and he should be able to it seems like it's going to be him and JSN, and they're going to light it up. JSN is tracking towards Calvin Johnson's all-time receiving yards record, which is a real confliction for me as, I love the Detroit Lions and I love the Ohio State Buckeyes. Maybe, just maybe, JSN can tie it.
There you go.
Not break it.
I am taking the Seahawks.
So am I.
Another big NFC West battle, the 6-2 Los Angeles Rams at, I believe, the 6-3 San Francisco 49ers. These two teams met earlier, and it was an overtime game, which the 49ers won, one of the few losses for the Rams. Same basic setup. Mac Jones still in there. The 49ers still going to be missing some key players on offense. What do you expect this time around from this matchup?
Well, so the Niners are kind of middle of the pack versus the run game in general. And but they give up the second most receptions to running back. Now, Kyren isn't, I don't want to say he's not known as a receiver. It's more of a function, I think, that they don't use him a ton as a receiver. And why would you when you have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, or Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua? But Kyren is averaging the second most targets and receptions in his career and the most receiving yards of his career this year. So I think Kyren's going to have a decent game. San Francisco's down some big players on defense, and I expect that Mac is just going to continue to play pretty well. They've got Kittle, they've got Juwan Jennings, no Pearsall, no Ayuk yet. It's going to be a CMC game for me. If I'm the 49ers, I want to keep the ball away from the Rams because they are explosive. And so I'm going to try to do everything I can with CMC. So I guess I've kind of leaked my way into your next question. Can Mac Jones sweep the Rams? Can they? Can he? Sure. Will he? Maybe. It's going to be, like I said, they need to control the ball, and CMC is the key to that. This looks like, to me, a RB1 week for CMC because with the Rams pass rush, they need to get rid of the ball quickly to keep Mac Jones upright. The Rams have a very good defense. So it's going to be a toss-up. And I think it's going to be a very good game. It's a division game. Two West Coast teams out there. I like the Rams in this game.
Yeah, I'm taking the Rams too. We'll see how it turns out. The 5-3 Detroit Lions at the 3-6 Washington Commanders. Dennis, last week, a career low scrimmage yards for Jahmyr Gibbs. Do you think he does better than that this week against the Commanders?
Yeah.
Be hard to be worse.
He's getting 56% of the rush attempts and double the pass targets of David Montgomery. The Lions, in no uncertain terms, have said, we recognize how talented this guy is. We like David Montgomery. We love Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs is RB8 on the year. Monty's RB23. Monty has much more volatility. I don't think last week is a harbinger of things to come for Jahmyr Gibbs. I would expect Gibbs to have a real good game.
Meanwhile, for the Commanders, no Jaden Daniels, no Terry McLaurin again. How are we feeling about Deebo Samuel?
Well, he's currently wide receiver 23. I think I like him better with Jaden Daniels. He was wide receiver 7 through week 5, wide receiver 73 since week 6. Their running game has struggled, and it makes them a little bit one-dimensional. Mariota, we've talked over the years about the damage done to his shoulder when he was at Tennessee. I like Deebo. He's the show. McLaurin hasn't been very available. Zach Ertz gets some run. Occasionally, Luke McCaffrey was catching like one big good for football play each week, but now he's out. So, Deebo's the show.
I'm taking the Lions.
Yeah, me too.
Sunday Night Football, the 5-3 Pittsburgh Steelers at the 6-3 Los Angeles Chargers. Dennis, how are we feeling about Aaron Rodgers? The Steelers have been okay. He hasn't turned the ball over, but he's not putting up big numbers back there as a passer.
Well, he's had 2 very good weeks. Week 1 and I think week 6, I think was game 5. Both weeks were the 2 weeks he put up the 4 touchdown passes. So he's got 2 weeks over 20 points, and it's on the back of the big touchdown defenses. Yep. So QB 17, I think he's very good as your mid to low end QB 2. And, if you're rolling him out there every week, he's going to give you the occasional pop game.
Meanwhile, for the Chargers, Kamani Vidal has been Jekyll and Hyde. October 12th, ran for 124 yards, looked great. Next week against the Colts, only 20 yards. Then back against the Vikings, 117 yards, looked great. Then last week against the Titans, only 30 yards. Facing a Steelers team that bottled up Jonathan Taylor last week, how are we feeling about Vidal?
Somebody's got to carry the ball there. He's probably it seems like it's going to be a pass heavy game. You've got Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, Oronde Gadsden, which may open up some opportunity for Vidal to make some chunk plays. I just don't think the volume's going to be there. I think he's probably flex worthy with some risk.
I'm actually going to take the Steelers here.
I believe in Justin Herbert. I'm going with the Chargers.
My Steelers pick might be a little self-serving. Monday Night Football, the Philadelphia Eagles 6-2 at the 5-2-1 Green Bay Packers. Dennis, A.J. Brown did, in fact, not get traded and is off the injury report. So how are you feeling about him going into Monday night?
So he's got 4 games under 10 points and 2 games over 20. Averaging 12.4 points per game. He's currently wide receiver 38. There's definitely a disconnect between the talent and the fantasy production. Devonta Smith is wide receiver 17, averaging 14.4 points per game. It's just so the hard thing is they are willing to not throw the ball. And, it's an offense with two high-end wide receivers. It's like my grandma owning two Lamborghinis. She's 97 years old. She'll be lucky if she drives them to the end of the driveway, let alone on the Autobahn in Germany. So, it feels like one of them's moving on after the season. The offense, as long as Jalen Hurts is running the offense and they're winning, they're not going to change it. Why would you? You've got Saquon Barkley, who, he's not having the year he did last year, and I think most reasonable people did not expect him to do that. It just is your wide receivers aren't going to eat on 25 pass attempts a game.
Yeah, I think the hard thing for them, AJ Brown signed a decent contract extension that actually ties him to the Eagles through 2029. Their potential out for him would be after 2026 because the dead cap for 2026 would be $72 million. Seems like a lot for a wide receiver. And I think they just re-signed Smith. Let me see if I can find Devonta Smith. It's a weird situation. I think that's why, in part, they said they weren't going to trade him because they wanted to keep him, but I don't think they could eat the hit. It would be $35.5 million to release Smith. He is also tied to them through 2028 on his current contract. So those guys are there seemingly for a while. Be interesting. Speaking of pass catchers, Tucker Kraft tore his ACL, not coming back. He was the most consistent and probably best pass catcher for the Packers. Who steps up in his stead?
What you're telling me is Tucker Kraft ain't walking through that door.
Yeah.
No, Romeo Doubs is the guy that has been the most consistent of the Packers wide receivers. I think that Luke Musgrave slides into the Tucker Kraft role pretty seamlessly. I think he's probably 80-85% Tucker Kraft production ability. Very athletically similar to Tucker Kraft. It just will come down to, does Jordan Love and the Packers believe in Luke Musgrave? Well, Doubs, 34 receptions, leads the team, 4 touchdowns, second to Tucker Kraft. Christian Watson is going to be that deep threat that Dontavian Wicks couldn't pull off with Tucker Kraft out, and Matthew Golden couldn't step up and become, Golden is second in wide receiver targets with 29. But he's got a pretty low, a lot of what I think I perceive Romeo Doubs as is a short area guy. But his yards per catch is 1.6 yards over Matthew Golden, who we all perceive as a speed guy, outside guy. So they've got some weapons. Getting Watson back is going to be good for them as long as he stays healthy. So Doubs, Golden, and Watson as their top 3 wide receivers, pretty decent. Luke Musgrave. The offense, though, runs through Josh Jacobs. So, he's 141 carries, 10 touchdowns, third on the team in receptions. So if I'm betting on one wide receiver, I think I'm going to bet on Doubs with the expectation that, one of these other guys might have a pop-off game, but it's going to be Dobbs is the guy I want for the volume.
Yeah, and Golden with a shoulder injury, because it's a Monday night game, they still haven't had to make a final designation, so something to watch out for. I'm actually taking the Eagles in this one.
You know what? I'm going off the reservation. I'm taking the Packers on the road.
Packers are at home.
Oh, whatever. Taking the Packers at home.
Should make you feel even better than being at home. An update, still 13-7, just about 4 minutes before the half in the Berlin game. The good news is Jonathan Taylor already more rushing yards than he had in all of Week 9 against the Steelers. So,
and a rushing touchdown. So,
and a rushing touchdown definitely makes you feel better. Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday recapping the rest of these games. Dennis, what is your one fondest hope for today's slate?
Well, I'm going to say I'm not super happy about the Michael Pittman no targets yet.
Yeah, but your boy Alec Pierce already 3 for 73 and a touchdown. So
yeah, but who the hell's starting Alec Pierce? So, if you got some time on your hands, head on over to your favorite podcast platform. Hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Give us a like, give us a subscribe.
It does make you feel better, though. Daniel Jones, we're almost at halftime and no turnovers, so that's good. Michael Penix lost a fumble, but it's also depressing. Tyler Algier, the rushing touchdown, and Bijan Robinson only 1 reception for -4 yards. It's not exactly what you're looking for there. So I feel hopeful. Well, you guys enjoy the slate of games today. We'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, have a wonderful week.